Hello and welcome to Stories of Resilience, our podcast series to promote an ACE-aware nation in Scotland. Adverse childhood experiences touch us all in one way or another. This series explores the thoughts of those involved with the ACEs movement in Scotland, and we talk to individuals who have stories of resilience to share. I'm Gary Robinson. My guest today on the podcast Stories of Resilience is Lynn Sweeney. Lynn Sweeney works for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service as a community safety advocate. Lynn, before we get into ACEs and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service's approach to ACEs, tell me about yourself first of all. What does a community safety advocate do?
Within Scottish Fire and Rescue, it's quite a varied role. You have the part of going into schools, doing talks, getting into care homes, doing talks. But to me, the most rewarding part of the job is going into homes that are classed as vulnerable, where people may have addiction problems, maybe there's dementia in the family, where they're just seen as being at higher risk of having fires, or even maybe falls, or just needing additional support. So we get a lot of referrals from the police, social work, hospital discharge team, and we go in, and obviously our initial resolve is to try and see if there's any additional risk for fire and how we can make them safer. But as part of that role, we are also looking to see if there's any other signposting that we can do. Is the client maybe subject to having additional falls? Is there domestic violence involved? Is there some way that we could put them onto a referral path? So we look at it as a full package where we're working very closely with our other partner agencies to try and make those individuals much more safe and secure, and to remain in their own home as long as possible.
Is it widely known in the community that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service provide this? Because as you describe it to me, I'm like, oh right, gosh, the service do that as well. Because as somebody on the street, as it were, you tend to think that you see a fire engine going back, and you think they're going to an emergency. Sounds very much like your job is very much about prevention. Would that be right?
Yeah, the fire service realises that prevention and protection is the way forward. Yes, we're there to put out fires. Yes, we're there to go to road traffic accidents. But it's far better if we can prevent things before they actually get to that stage. So around about 4 years ago, my role developed further in that we go out separately from the crews. It was the crews who did the bulk of the home fire safety visits, but that's now developed to the community safety advocate, because we can spend more time with the clients, and we are not going to get a call to go to an incident. So it means that we don't have to leave the visit maybe when we're in the middle of trying to put things in place. It has taken a while to get that service widely recognised, but through working very closely with police, social work, as we say, the NHS, we work very closely with partners, and I've got to say that now most of them, when they have a new client, it's an automatic referral to ourselves, and we'll go out either myself and my colleague, or we'll go out maybe with social worker, police if there is special circumstances. But probably the wider public maybe not quite as aware of it, because it is more a specialised service. We're trying to reduce the amount of fires and incidents, because that is the way forward, because the trauma involved after an incident for an individual is immense. So prevention and protecting the communities is seen as a much better option.
Let's talk about adverse childhood experiences. When did the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service become aware of ACEs?
It's actually a very new situation. It started out at the start of this year when I went on a secondment, which was funded by North Lanarkshire Council, where they wanted all their partner agencies to be aware of ACEs and to implement Solihull training, which is a way to engage with young people and to try and help them overcome ACEs. And I was appointed at that stage, and in the first sort of few weeks I had to go through some additional training. And while I was waiting to go in the final training, somebody approached me and said, do you know, there's a viewing of the Resilience film. I think you should come along. I think it might be beneficial to the work that you're doing. And I went along to the film, and I really understood that phrase. You know, it was like a light bulb moment, because I saw the film, and although I really was engaged with Solihull and really understood it, actually seeing it in the film of how the trauma really, really impacts on our children and our communities made me realise that, do you know what, we need to take this a step further. And I approached my senior staff and said, look, we've got to get this film, we've got to show it to our staff, they've got to be aware of this. And I've got to say, within an hour they came up with the funding, and we bought the film. And I then started going round, mostly our prevention and protecting staff, our community safety advocates, because these are the people who are engaging in our communities much more effectively on a daily basis, trying to make sure that prevention protection is in place. And ACES comes under that umbrella, it comes under that remit, because prevention and protection is the way forward for ACES. So, as I say, it has been a fairly new awareness for the fire service, but we do identify that it's extremely important that we are aware of the impact of this that it has within our community. And I've got to say, not just within our community, but within the fire service. We're not exempt from trauma at ACES just because we work for the fire service. And as a pilot, when we showed the film, we actually completed the ACE questionnaire on a voluntary basis, and there was other emergency services included in it. And the findings were quite stark, to say the least. We had 13% with 4 ACEs or more. And although the score's not as important as the effect of the trauma, it let our organisation see that ACEs aren't just out there, that they're everywhere. They're within our organisation and within our communities, and it's something that we need to address.
It was interesting a couple of weeks ago, and you may have heard it, the podcast with Chief Superintendent Paul Main over in Ayrshire in Scotland. He was exactly the same. Said, look, it's not just about the people that we come in contact with on a daily basis. It's our own people as well, and we need an understanding of that. With regard to the film Resilience, generally, how was it received?
I think the impact was much greater than I had anticipated. What we did was, after the film, we had a 5 or 10 minute break to try and digest it, because it is a lot of information to take in, especially if you have had no knowledge of it before. And then we did a discussion on how we felt that impacted on us within our role within the fire service, and also how it impacted with each other, with our colleagues. Did it give us a better understanding of our colleagues? Did it make us more understanding, maybe after being to an incident that was quite traumatic? And the outcomes were, as far as I was concerned, really, really encouraging, because it made me realise that, you know, we really do care about our communities. We live in the communities, we work in the communities, and it's important that we understand the impact of ACES on our communities. And when I say community, I mean the community of the fire service, as well as the community in which we work. So it has been very well received, and everybody has said this has to go through the full organisation. Everyone has to see it, from senior management level right down to those working on the ground. So, no, it has been really, really positive, and for me very encouraging, because it was difficult knowing what the reaction was going to be.
Mm-hmm. You've answered my next question, really, but we'll just recap. I was going to say, it is early days, and it sounds like not only are you a community safety advocate, but it sounds like you're an advocate for the film and for ACES. Early days, as I said, within the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. How long do you think it's going to be before the service takes a full adoption of it? Is it going to take months? Could it take a year or so? What's the feeling on the ground?
Having spoken to senior management, they are very much committed to ACEs, and that knowledge has to be imparted to our colleagues. They recognise the advantage and how much more effective we can be within our community if we're a more trauma-informed organisation. How long that will take, I would not like to commit at this stage. What I have taken on a commitment to do, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through that, is to make sure that all our prevention and protection staff, those are community safety advocates and our community firefighters, see the resilience film and have Solihull training by the end of this year. And that will be completed. I've just put the last training session in my diary this morning. To take that forward, that is something from a logistics point of view, because obviously it's the Scottish Fire Service and it's a massive area, and how we pass that information on is something that we'll have to look at. And at this stage, I wouldn't want to put a time scale on it, but definitely we hope by the end of the year that all our community safety advocates and prevention protection staff will have seen the resilience film.
I'm slightly intrigued, and there may be people listening to this podcast. Just in a snapshot, if you can, Lynn, what is Solihull training?
Solihull training was originally developed in Solihull by midwives and health visitors to help working with children who maybe had sleep problems, etc. But it has been massively developed since then, and we have looked at the programme and adapted it for emergency services. And it gives you a better understanding of how poor attachment, not having that one caring adult in the very early development of a child, how it affects their development and their behaviour. And it teaches you to look beyond the behaviour, to see the child, to ask more questions, to wonder more, and how to engage more effectively with that child. Because at the end of the day, as fire service, we have a lot of input in the community. We work with children's homes, we work with children in care, we have our fire skills programmes, our antisocial behaviour programmes, and it helps us engage more effectively by having that better understanding and being able to have a reason why we see the behaviour, but to try and question that behaviour and say not, what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you. So it's to try and change our language, to change the way we think and the way we look at the communities in which we work in. So it just gives us a better understanding and hopefully help us to be more effective in the roles that we carry out.
Great answer. Thank you for that, Lynn. Let's look towards the conference now. I take it that you're going to be there with your colleagues?
Yep, I will definitely be there. And I actually said to Suzanne that I actually felt as if I was going to the first concert I ever went to, the Apollo in Glasgow, which obviously I'm showing my age now, but it has that level of excitement, and I'm really looking forward to it.
It certainly is gathering apace, and with availability of tickets being limited as we speak, as we record this podcast, and with what depends when you're listening to this. You may be listening to this post conference, but actually, as we record this, we've got about 2 or 3 weeks to go, and it's really getting very exciting, almost fever pitch. The press are picking up on it, and there's a real good positive vibe about the whole thing. What are you hoping to get out of the conference, Lynn?
Obviously, I'm really looking forward to the speakers, because I think there'll be a lot of information there that we can use and we can take forward. And I think also it lets you know that you're not the only sole voice. Sometimes, particularly in bigger organisations, when you're trying to get the message across, but it's good to know that others are working away doing the exact same thing. The other part I'm really looking forward to is meeting people who are in organisations like myself, and we can share ideas, we can share things that we've tried, things that have worked, how we're getting the information across, how we can be more effective. To me, that's really, really exciting, as well as listening to the speakers. I think it will be a really fulfilled day, and I feel that I'm positive that when we come out of the conference, we'll have new energy to take this forward, because it's really, really important. The impact that ACEs has in our community is far greater than any of us, I think, ever thought initially. And what I do believe is that the number of ACEs is not what we need to focus on too much, but more on the impact it has on the individual, because a person with one ACE can have much bigger impact than someone with 3 or 4 ACEs if they don't have that strong attachment, they don't have that one caring adult. And even within the fire service, we can be part of that community to show that we care and that we want to help, and we want to provide a much better environment for our children in our communities to be part of.
So if we look at the public sector, and you talk about meeting other organisations, do you think to make Scotland an ACE-aware nation successfully, the public sector, the fire service, the police and so on and so forth, need to take a collaborative approach to this?
I do. I don't think individually we can do that on our own, particularly within the fire service. We maybe not engage for a long enough period with an individual, a young child or a family. We might only have a week or a couple of days input. But if we can work collectively with our families and we can share that responsibility as corporate parents, we can then, as a team, work towards making that family feel more safe, more secure, and that we care and that we really do want to make things better for them. Prevention and protection, as we've said in the fire service, is extremely important, and we see that as part of the role, is working with ACEs and working with that trauma-informed service. But we need the support, and we need to work together to share that responsibility to work with our families within the community.
And what would you like to see happen in practical terms after the conference? What, somebody who has a vested interest in adverse childhood experiences, as a country, what do we need to do? Because I had a very interesting podcast with Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk, and I asked a question. So this is the start. And she went, no, this is not the start. This is part of, part of the journey that we're on, which started just over 10 years ago, and when we spoke about the Violence Reduction Unit, and ACES seems now to have it has a new. I'm very conscious when I say this because I can hear Suzanne screaming at the podcast, but it's almost has a new lease of life because of what's going on currently. What do we need to do as a country to make sure that we continue, that the conference almost has a legacy, if you like? Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that this isn't going to be a one-off, that we've got to, those who are working and see the effects of trauma and adverse childhood experiences have got to continue this campaign. We've got to continue to make people aware. We can't tire of it. It can't be a one-off experience. But knowing about ACEs is not enough. It's what's the next step. What do we put in place? We have to look at how we work within our schools. We have to look at how we work within our early years practice. We have to look at our NHS services. Anywhere that we engage within the community, we've got to look at our practices. We've got to look at our language. We've got to look at our policies. Are they effective? Are they making our families feel safe and secure? Are we providing that support for parents and skills to provide the attachment that's needed? We've got to look at all these engagement processes, because if we don't, we will never break the cycle. We've got to break the cycle, because all that will happen is that if you look back, at the moment I am reading constantly so many books, hiding in plain sight, right from the start, and they're all saying the same thing. We've got to get right at the roots. We've got to look at our parenting skills. We've got to look at the support we put in for our families who have got additional needs, who need additional support. Because addiction, violence, that is a result of something that's happened. and we've got to look at what's happened. We've got to stop putting sticking plasters on things. We've got to find out what caused it in the first place. I don't believe people choose to be alcoholics or choose to be drug addiction or choose to crime in most cases. I think there's always an underlying reason, and we've got to dig a bit deeper, and we've got to put those support measures, and we've got to spend the money now, because if we don't, we're going to pay for it in the long term through our NHS, through our prison services. So we've got to get it right from the start, right from the early years, and put the support. It just can't be a case of, we know about ACEs. We've got to take it that step further.
Lynn Sweeney, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
That was Stories of Resilience, celebrating individuals and organisations who are helping to make Scotland an ACE-aware nation. Find out more about ACEs and the ACE Aware Conference this September in Glasgow at www.aceawarescotland.com.